chapter 77, the penultimate. So when they meet again, 'tis in Bishop, and any third observer might note in an instant the deterioration the year intervening has brought to each. Dixon's pronounced limp and bile-stained eyeballs, Mason's slow retreat, his steps taken backward, only just stubborn enough to keep facing the light, into melancholy. Increasingly ill at ease with change of any kind, be it growing a year older or watching America, once home to him as the desert to a nomad upon it, in its great convulsion. Mason has begun to dream of a nighttime city, of creeping among monuments of stone, perhaps twice his height, of seeking refuge from some absolute, pitiless upheaval in relations among men. 'Twas Stonehenge, absent Becca and moonlight. The monuments made no sense at all. They were not statues, they bore no inscriptions. They were the knight's standing stones, put there by some agency, remote not in time, but from caring at all what happened to the poor fugitives who now scurried among them, seeking their brute impenetrability for cover. Whoever their makers had been, they were invisible now, with their own chronicles, their own intentions, whatever these were, and they glided on without any need for living witnesses. Were this but a single dream, wiped out as usual by the rattling quotidian, Mason might even have forgotten it by now. But it keeps coming back. More accurately, he returned to it, the same city, the same unlit anarchy, again and again, each time to be plunged into the middle of whatever has been going on in his absence. At first he visits fortnightly, but within the year he is journeying there every night. Even more alarmingly, he is not always asleep. Out of doors against his will, a city in chaos, the lights too few, the differences between friend and enemy not always clear, and mistakes a penny a bushel. Reflection upon any topic is an unforgivable lapse, out here where at any moment death may come whistling in from the dark. "Well, hello, Death. What's that you're whistling?" "Oh, little Ditters von Dittersdorf. Nothing you'd recognize hasn't happened yet. Not even sure you'll live till it's performed anywhere. Have to check the folio as to that. Get back to you." "No hurry, truly, no hurry." "You cute rascal." Death reaching out to pinch his cheek. Sometimes Mason wakes before traversing into the next episode. Sometimes the bony thumb and finger continue their approach, asymptotically ever closer, be he waking or dreaming something else. Their visits, wrote the Reverend on unnamed authority, consisted of silence when fishing, fevered nocturnal conversation when not, though even beside the weir, or in it, are they ever conversing, in their silences, the true measure of their history. Mason arrives one day to find Dixon sitting there with giant heaps of cherries and charcoal. Have some, offering Mason his choice. Excuse me, the gout is eased by things that begin with CH? Why, aye, they don't know that in Gloucestershire. Chicken? In the form of soup, particularly. Chops, cheese, chocolate. 'Tis considered an entertaining affliction by those who have not suffered it. Oh, Dixon, I didn't mean. Every turn now a chance for someone taking the hump. Here, your cushion, may I? First thing is, you mustn't touch the foot, thank thee. Bit abrupt, sorry, yet do I know this by now like a county map, where the valleys of least pain lie and where the peaks to avoid. Every movement has to be planned like a damned expedition. Meg Bland is the only mortal, nothing personal, who may even breathe too close to it. Lucky me, says she, in the door straight as a swift, a tall, ginger-haired beauty disinclined to pass her time unproductively. Margaret Bland gave up on marrying Dixon long ago. Indeed, these days is reluctant, when the topic arises, even to respond. We'll have the wedding just before we go to America, he said, and we'll go to America as man and wife. For a while she was a good sport, and allowed herself to be entertained with his accounts of what adventure and wealth were there to seize in that fabled place. But there soon grew upon her, as she had observed it in her mother, a practical disillusionment before the certainty of death, that men, for their part, kept trying to put off as long as possible. She saw Jerry doing just that, with his world of maps, his tenderness and care as he bent over them, as herself, resigned to tending him. No different than man and wife, really. I love her, he tells Mason. I say that, yet to myself I think, she's my last, how would thou say? She's a good woman, Mason says. Thou must see that. Bringing me cherries every day, for this, pollicating the toe, shaking his head, laughing in perplexity, he looks over at Mason, finds Mason looking at him. The girls are mine. Mason, who rarely these days smiles. Well, in fact. They sit nodding at each other for a while. Thou must have seen it, in their faces, in Mary and Elizabeth for fair. So that's what it is. Well, they are beautiful young women, despite it all. They boys, they must be nearly grown. Mason nodding. Oh, and I got married again. Forgot to mention that. Aye, then we had Charles Jr. Then 2 weeks after he was born, my dad got married again. We both married women named Mary. Thou would like them both, I know. Mine in particular. She's young? Amazing. How do these people? Strange Geordie powers, friend, and I know thou need as many children as possible, as a bridge over a chasm, to keep thee from falling into the sky. Charlie the baby is the very image of my dad. That's what's so peculiar. The boys look like Rebecca, but the baby, the resemblance makes me jumpy. I expect him to start shouting at me. Sometimes he does. Can't understand any of it, of course, but then I can't make out my dad either. Then all's fairly as usual. I come to the mill every morning and he gives me one loaf. Take this day thy daily bread, every time. 'Tis wit. 'Tis great fun for him. How inveterate a hatred shall I be able to enjoy for someone who looks like my baby son? Thus seem disappointed. Next worst thing to unrequited love, isn't it? Insufficient hate. And yet it's done thee a world of good. The months, often years of time thou didn't know thou had. Years off my age. And with another coming in right about harvest time. Yet how can thou be sure? Maybe I hate children. Fuck it. Oh yeah, that part's wrong. Speech marks. And with another coming in right about harvest time. Yet how can thou be sure? Maybe I hate children. Then feel free to ignore my wish of much joy, Mason, should thou be in Supperton. Shouldn't thou be in Supperton with thy Mary? Her mother is there, and they are just as content to have me away. They are dozing together by Dixon's hearth. Both their pipes are out. The fret has gathered in the waste places, crossed them, and come to the edge of the town. Anything may lie just the other side, having a peep. There is jollity at the Queen's Head, though here in Bondgate, for the moment, the bricks are silent. Each is dreaming about the other. Mason dreams them in London, at some enormous gathering. It is named the Royal Society, but is really something else. Some grand testimonial, already many days in progress, upon a stage before a pit in which the crowds are ever circulating. Bradley is there, living and hale. Mason keeps trying to find him so that Dixon and he may meet. But each new face is a new distraction, and presently he cannot find Dixon either. Dixon is dreaming of a public performance as well, except it's he and Mason who are up on the stage, and whoever may be watching are kept invisible by the lights that separate stage and pit. They are both wearing cheap, but serviceable suits, and backed by a chamber orchestra, they are singing and doing a few simple time steps. It was fun while it lasted, and it lasted quite a while. For the blurry-eyed lad from the coal pits, and the gazer with the big city style, we came, we peeped, we shouted with surprise, though half the time we couldn't tell the falsehoods from the lies. I say, is that a... No, it ain't. I do apologize. This astronomer's life, say, pure as a fife, hey, quick as a knife in the dark. Oh, we went out to Cape Town, Philadelphia too, though we didn't quite get to Ohio. There were marvels aplenty to view. Those trees, those hills, those vegetables so high, the cataracts and caverns, and the spectres in the sky. I say, was that? I hope not. Who the deuce said that? Not I. It's a wonderful place. Oh, nothing but space. Go off on a chase in the dark. Dixon wakes briefly. It's a damned well better be bodily resurrection, that's all I can say. One final expedition, Dixon believed. A bit more gold in the sack, and he'd be free to return to America. Look up Washington and Franklin, Captain Shelby and the other lads. Find the perfect seat in the West. He knows where the coal is, the iron and lead, and if there's gold, he'll witch that out of the earth too. The trick lies less in hollowing out the wand or putting in the tiny samples of everything you're not looking for, than in holding it then, so as to adjust for the extra weight. Let George have all Cockfield fell. In America is abundance, impossible to reach the end of in one lifetime. Hence, from the mortal point of view, infinite. By the time he might have emigrated at last, Mary Hunter Dixon had grown ill, and in January 73 she passed to a better place. Busy with rebellion, America drew back toward the edges of Dixon's frame, where the shadows gathered. In the meantime, the demand for coal in Britain promising to ascend forever, there seemed to Dixon no reason to abandon too quickly a sure source of work, in order to cross the ocean and settle in a wilderness of uncertainty. American reports that reached him mentioned Shelby's fighting in the West and all the McLeans joining the Virginia militia. By then Dixon had surveyed the park and demesnes of the Lord Bishop's castle at Bishop Auckland, and the year after that all of Lancaster Common. Wilderness enough for him, though no longer is he sent quite as much into panicked incompetence at the Allied by more land unenclosed, as if he has found late protection, or at least toleration from the fell beasts of his younger days. At the plane table, he erases his sketching mistakes with bits of bread he then keeps in a pocket, not wishing to cast them where birds might eat the lead and come to harm. Now and then, only half in play, he will take a folding rule and measure the ever-decreasing distance between the tip of his nose and the paper. For among surveyors 'tis said that by the degree of proximity there betwixt may you tell how long a draftsman has been on the job, and that when his nose at last touches the paper, 'tis time to retire. He continued to postpone the American return, whose mere projection had separated him from Mason, and to recognize more clearly as the days went along that his life had caught up with him, and that his death might not be far behind, and that America now would never be more real than his remembrance, which he must take possession of in whatever broken incompleteness, or lose forever. I was sure my fate lay in America, nor would I've ever predicted that like thee I would swallow the anchor and be claimed again by the life I had left, which I had not after all escaped. Nor can I accurately say 'twas all Meg's doing, and the girls', for I was never like thee, never one for duty and so forth, being much more of a flirtatious bastard, thusy, yet I couldn't leave them again. That was it, really. To leave home, to dare the global waters strange and deep, consort with the highest men of science, and at the end return to exactly the same place, used, broken. Nobody's dream of a life for fair. You always wanted to be a soldier, Dixon, but didn't you see that all our way west and back, aye, and the transits too, were campaigning, geometric as a Prussian cavalry advance, though in the service of a flag whose colours we never saw, and that your behaviour in hostile territory was never less than, likely to be mentioned in dispatches. I'll take it gratefully. The only hope, I suppose, is if we haven't come home exactly. I mean, if it's not the same, not really, if we might count upon that failure to re-arrive perfectly, to be seen in all the rest of creation. I hope that's not the only hope. They have been nymphing by moonlight in the weir, hoping for sea trout, though finding none. Now, upon the bankside, Mason and Dixon sit, smoking long white clay pipes, whose stems arch like fishing poles, and bickering about the species eluding them. Dixon seeming to Mason far too eager to lecture, as if having assumed that Mason has never seen a sea trout, which, though true in a narrow sense, doesn't rule out his having felt them once or twice at the bait. Whilst not as shrewd as the carp, Dixon declares, yet are they over-endowed with pride, and will have thee know there are things a sea trout simply will not do, such as waste his time upon an insect that dares the flow too briskly, there being too much humiliation for him should he attempt capture and fail. Humiliation before whom, Dixon? Frogs? Grebes? You have discussed this with the sea trout here personally, have you? Perhaps even more than once? I ken them, sir. I see into their minds. 'Tis how I know that thou must leave aside thy own pride, and learn to feign with thy bait weakness, uncertainty, fatigue. They hear swift footsteps close by, and in a moment behold, approaching them, sniffing industriously, a Norfolk terrier of memorable appearance. Well, God's periwig, whispers Mason. 'Tis he. Can't be. What's it been? 15, 16 years? And this one's scarcely a year old. Yet see how he holds his head. Old Fang's way to the arc second. Yes, it's all right, lad. Come on. The dog, as if not wishing to intrude, waits, tail a thump. Why, he's the very representation. Might he have been with those strollers lately at the Queen's Head, that vanished in the middle of the night? Happen they left him behind. Will not insist ye speak for your supper, offers Mason. Not at all. Come back with us and we'll see about that, shall we? The dog accompanies them to Dixon's house, dines unselectively though not gluttonously, and having made amiable acquaintance with the dogs already resident there, stops overnight. Quite at home, to appearance, Mason remarks next morning. Nay, clearly 'tis thee he fancies. He's a town dog. He'd much rather stop with you than journey all the way to Sapperton. Why cannot the see he can't wait to be back upon the road, touring again? A modest wager, perhaps. We never settled for that great race in Chestertown 10 years ago twixt Selam and Yorick. Really? Which horse won? Who'd I bet on? The dog listens to them for as long as he may, before standing, stretching and trotting away to explore Bishop, nor reappearing till that night, round supper time. There you are again, Meg Bland stooping to greet him. I've been making him those fried American cornmeal articles of yours, Jerry, to have with his fish. What'll his name be? Fang, says Mason. Learned, says Dixon. The dog ignores both, however, as if his true name is one they must guess. Each day the weather allows, he accompanies Mason and Dixon to the river, and watches whilst they fish. He does not venture to speak, indeed only barking once, when Lud O'Fery, an otherwise unremarkable person of middling age, comes down out of the willows and into the water, pretending to be a pike in fierce descent upon the dace shoals, attempting to send all the fish he may into a panicked stampedo. Sacrilege, where I come from, mutters Mason. 'Tis but Lud's bit of diversion whenever he's above ground. Throw him a chub and he'll be off. As Mason's departure nears, Dixon can see he's growing more and more anxious upon the topic of canine speech. How then? Coerce him? Shame him? Think not. Yet one would expect, wouldn't one? The dog, as ever, bright-eyed and companionably attending. That out of professional obligation, at least. Eh, Mason? Really? All right. Ever so sorry. Close to dawn, dreaming of America, whose name is something else, and maps of which do not exist, Mason feels a cold nose at his ear. When ye wake, whispers a youthful South English voice, I'll have long been out upon the Darlington road. I am a British dog and belong to no one, if not to the two of you. The next time you are together, so shall I be, with you. They wake early. The dog has gone. Dixon reports the same nose, the same message. Did we both dream the same thing? I was awake, as certainly was I. Then must we see him again next year? End of chapter.